All righty, welcome back here to the Fast Break Podcast. I'm your host, Shoot the Rock. Just want to pop back on. It's been a couple weeks, but the college basketball season is now complete as your Michigan Wolverines are now your national champions. So we'll talk about the game a little bit, the tournament just like as a whole, and then some off-season stuff. Here's we got coaching carousel, transfer portals already open, so already some coach and player movement. As well, and then to wrap up the show, we'll talk a little NBA standings, final week here of the NBA. Some kind of games to watch, ones that could really impact the seating here. So why don't we start with that here first, the national championship game from last night, and make sure to drop your takes on the game here in the comments. So Michigan takes down UConn 69-63 in a game that really just kind of felt like Michigan was pretty much in control, especially in the second half. First half was, pretty good battle here. UConn, led at points pretty back and forth, but this is a game where Michigan, they were a top 3 team in the sport all year. I've said this on a couple different shows now. So it was fun to watch them, kind of have their moment last night, finally, get crowned the national champions. And the player for them that really stepped up, a guy that I did not see kind of coming here before the tournament, was Elliot Cadeau. He ends up winning the Final Four most outstanding player. He has 19 points with 2 assists in this one, has another, really big game. And he just played such a big role for this Michigan team where, their one concern was their guard play of, especially with the injury of LJ Kaysen, how would that affect them? And it really didn't, just because of how well Cadeau and, Namari Burnett at times, and even Roddy Gale here off the bench Roddy Gale McKinney, who didn't have great games, huge games last night by any means, but everyone kind of had their moments, but especially Elliot Cadeau. So he leads the way with 19. Axel Lendenborg had 13 last night, but you definitely kind of tell some of the injuries he suffered on Saturday, played a factor where he just didn't, really look like himself. Didn't look the same. Obviously, goes 0-5 from beyond the arc, 4-13, just really wasn't moving great. But then Morez Johnson with 12 points and 10 rebounds, nice double-double for him. And Ade Mara really didn't even need to have a huge game, goes 8 points, 4 boards. So, a lot of the usual suspects here for Michigan getting the job done. On the UConn side, they were led by Alex Karaban, went for 17 points and 11 rebounds, as well as Terrace Reed, who was there, just started the tournament. He had 13 points and 14 rebounds. And Terrace Reed, if it was not for him, this team would have lost to Furman. UConn was not on the ropes, but Furman was playing them very tough. But Terrace Reed just absolutely dominated that game, and he had just had multiple games throughout the course of this tournament where he really just dominated. And that ends up, kind of being the difference here, what got them to this point. Obviously, you have guys like Braylon Mullins who have big shots along the way, but not his best game last night. 11 points on 17 shots, 3 of 10 from beyond the arc. It was definitely just a very defensive game. And that's a style you kind of wanted to play. They wanted to muck it up and turn this into a Big East style game. But Michigan is just so talented that they can contend with that style. And it really, they almost just kind of beat UConn at their own game. And granted, was there some questionable calls, calling it a little bit tighter than UConn would have liked, but I think to say this was a ref show, the refs decided this game, I just don't think that's true at all. I think Michigan, in this one really did just prove to be the better team. And you really saw it there, like I said, especially in the second half. That was really kind of the difference was, right around the end of the first half here, UConn got that hook and hold that then, Michigan ends up being able to take the lead into the half, and they never end up trailing in the second half. And really, in all honesty, just kind of end up, running away with the game. Granted, UConn had their chance. There was a little run there where, they hit a 3, got a steal. It kind of looked like, okay, maybe this is their moment. But Trey McKinney, I believe it was, answered back with a big 3 of his own. And, Michigan really just kind of put that threat to bed really quickly, and ends up, like I said, winning a very impressive game. Like I said, they were one of the best teams in the sports all year. It was really, they go 37-3. They were a 1 seed. We really kind of nitpicked, some of their early season results where, a TCU plays them tough. A Wake Forest played them really tough. They almost, lost at Penn State to start the year. So, they're a team that, at times, had their things where it was maybe this is why I don't believe them. That's kind of why I liked Duke and Arizona more in this tournament. But Duke doesn't end up getting there, and Michigan obviously, just kind of whoops Arizona on Saturday night there in the Final Four. So we can kind of move on to that. Just kind of talking about the tournament here as a whole, just because, we obviously did our bracket, preview before. Shout out, Danny and Matt for coming on with that. And, we're going to try to have some more guests on here, for the NBA playoffs and throughout the off season. It was a lot of fun doing it with them. But overall, this tournament, I would say, it was not as good as last year's. Granted, last year we got three of the best Final Four games ever, which like it's going to be really hard to top. Where this year's Final Four was a little underwhelming. Where like I said, similar to like the national championship game, UConn Illinois felt like UConn was kind of in control the entire time. Like the moment was a little bit too big for Illinois. Really felt kind of like the reverse of the national title game where Michigan did UConn what UConn did to Illinois. And then Arizona, Michigan being hyped up as like a game of the century did not deliver. And you kind of see that. It was kind of similar to Gonzaga Baylor a couple years ago. That was another one. It was like really hyped up of like, oh, this is going to be a great game. This, Gonzaga was undefeated heading into that one. And Baylor just really kind of dominated. And that Michigan-Arizona game had a really similar feel. Now, the other big talking point when you talk about, the NCAA tournament as a whole here is the lack of Cinderellas. It's the second year in a row here that we see this. Our closest thing we could have to a Cinderella would be either Texas, an 11 seed, making the Sweet 16. And granted, you're not going to call the University of Texas a Cinderella by any means. And, or then Iowa, who was a 9 seed, making the Elite Eight. And same thing, it's Iowa. It's a team that, is a power conference team, a Big Ten team. I'm not really sure if I'd consider them a Cinderella. You guys go ahead and tell me down here in the comments. But once again, like really the only like low seed upsets, we had VCU over Carolina and High Point over Wisconsin. And, those are two like really good mid-major teams where like High Point, spends way more than the rest of the Big South there. VCU is a team that's like perennially kind of run the A10 here recently where, I don't think the Big East is going to expand anytime soon, but if they did, like VCU is kind of one of those teams that might be considered just because of their success here in the A10. So, if people want to say that's a little bit disappointing that we didn't get, say like McNeese played Vanderbilt close, but couldn't kind of pull it off. Like Santa Clara, granted it's a 10 seed, but, Santa Clara over Kentucky. Wright State played Virginia, tough at times. Like, yeah, it does kind of stink that on that first Friday of the tournament, the favorites went 16-16. That is a little rough. But overall, like I would say this was a good tournament. We got some good games. Like, the Vanderbilt-Nebraska game was an absolute thriller. Like, Illinois-Houston, Illinois kind of ran away with that one, but that was, a good game, one that was, hyped up on paper. I mean, this East region here of the St. John's Duke game after, St. John's, Kansas, then Duke, St. John's, then Duke, UConn, we're all just like insane games. Even UConn, Michigan State, really good games. And that's the thing where if, you don't get a ton of upsets, you get, a 1-5, 2-3 matchup. Like you get good matchups. I mean, Texas, Purdue even was a really good game. So there was still very good games. Like there was very high level games. And I think that's what you kind of get more of when you don't have the Cinderellas that go deep. Like I always think to St. Peter's, like, yeah, it was sweet that as a 15 seed they made the Elite Eight, but then like the North Carolina St. Peter's game, the Elite Eight was kind of a stinker where UNC just kind of ran all over them. So you get better games. Granted, other than Duke, UConn, maybe the Elite Eight games weren't like the greatest either. Like Michigan just destroyed Tennessee. Illinois was pretty much in control against Iowa, and same thing kind of Arizona against Purdue, where like Purdue stuck around longer than maybe those other two teams. But so I would say overall is a good tournament. And granted, yeah, I think it's a bit of a new norm we're going to have to expect here of we're probably not going to see as many Cinderellas anymore. Like the Cinderella is going to be in Iowa, who's a school that's led by a bunch of guys that were playing Division II ball 2 years ago and were at Drake last year as a 9 seed, where they have talent, but maybe weren't the upper echelon of their power conference, but they go on a run here, get hot at the right time, and as a 9 seed make the Elite Eight. Or, a Texas, where, like I said, very talented team, but they're an 11 seed. They underperformed, but then, it clicked at the right time. So granted, yeah, would you love to see a brand like more of a mid-major brand as opposed to like these power conference brands? Yes, but sometimes these teams, kind of played themselves. Like St. Louis is a perfect example. They were a 9 seed. They were a really good team, but if they hadn't dropped a couple games down the stretch, they probably would have been more of like a 6 or a 7 seed, where then you could have seen them, go on a run here. Like they obviously, the score doesn't reflect it, but they played Michigan like tougher than a lot of other teams, or kind of similar level in all honesty. So that's what we're kind of going to have to see here. I think you just have to expect B power conference teams that underperform, or hope that it is like a team from the A10 or the, now probably the Pac-12, I would consider more of a mid-major league. Like teams like that, or maybe not the Pac-12 as much like the Mountain West, but like teams like that get hot here and then go on a run. So that too, let me pull that up real quick because we had some NCAA tournament expansion. It looks like it's finally coming to fruition that we can touch on here. So NCAA tournament is reportedly expanding to 76 teams next year. And, this is one of those, like, people really aren't a huge fan of it. And I would have to agree. I guess there's really not more to this article. I was hoping there'd be more to it. but it's something that seems like it's happening. Now, granted, is this probably a bad thing? I would say yes, because one, we're going to get more of these like mid teams that really aren't great. I mean, Auburn, they win the NIT, and it was fun to watch them go on that NIT run. But now, like, okay, we let them in the NCAA tournament. They maybe win their play-in game, and that's about it. And granted, I don't know how if they've announced like how they're going to do this yet. How it'll be? I'm assuming it'll be more of now. It's like the last 12 teams in will play, and then like the last 12 like teams in the field is total. So like all the 16 seeds will be playing games, and then like 2 of the 15s kind of thing. But they'll never do this. But here's my like hypothetical, what I would love to see for this NCAA tournament expansion. So now, like I said, it's going to be 24 teams playing in the like first 4 play-in round, whatever you want to call it. So what I would do, I do the last 8 like teams. So like, all the 16. So all the 16 seeds would be playing games. So, or essentially you do like the 4 16 seeds, the 4 17 seeds, something like that, maybe kind of thing. So that I wouldn't change that. I just add the games. And like I said, let me know your guys' thoughts on this in the comments. Then I would do the last 8 at-large teams from multiple bid leagues. So if you have your conference, like the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, ACC, the Big East, if you're from a league that already has more than one team just in the field, you get it, like you are eligible for these last 8 spots. And then those 8 teams would play the last 8 teams in from one bid league. So where if you're a league, like for example, Miami, Ohio would qualify in this year, where their conference champion was the only team to actually be in the field. So then any other team. So then it would be like a Miami, Ohio. It would be like a Belmont. It would be other teams, maybe like, this year, like New Mexico and San Diego State, like the Mountain West only had one team in the field in Utah State. So teams that, for the most part, it would be like teams that were the 1 seed, like won their regular season championship, but then didn't win in like lost early in the conference room. Let me see if I can find the like last 4 in, first 4 out, and pull this up, because then I could have like a better kind of talking about this, where it would be like I'm saying. So it'd be like teams like, let's see here. So like the last 4 in were NC State, Texas, SMU, Miami, Ohio. First 4 out were Oklahoma, Auburn, San Diego State, Indiana. Okay, so like NC State, Texas, SMU, Oklahoma, Auburn, Indiana, and then it'd be like 2 more teams would be like those last 8 in from the power conferences, and then the Miami's and like San Diego State. Like I said, I think New Mexico would have been right there because they were a 1 seed in the NIT. Tulsa was a 1 seed in it. So like those teams, Belmont opted out because of their coach, but like Belmont, I think would have been up there. I guess I could just pull up the NIT bracket and kind of talk about it from there, where like, a lot of these teams that were 1 and 2 seeds in the NIT because their conference like only had, 1 team. And again, this like, mid-major teams kind of here, like have those teams then play the power conference teams. And that's where then you have like your, we figure out here of like, okay, who would actually be in. So like Wake Forest is a 1 seeded, for example, they would be as well, another like, hey, they're in the last 8 power conference teams in. And then, yeah, like New Mexico, Tulsa, like I said, and then, the Daytons, Nevada, teams like that. Even then, like you go down to like Colorado State, Wichita State, teams like that. So conferences where only their conference champion make it, they would then play in the play-in games. So that way, we get more mid-major representation. Because that's the thing, is like if we get more mid-major representation, I'm all for, expanding the tournament. Because then, hey, maybe then we will get some more Cinderellas where, there's more mid-major teams in the league as opposed to these power conference teams that we just kind of know like aren't good. Like we've seen them play, they could get hot at the right time like at Texas, but we've seen them play enough where we know they aren't a good team. So that's how I would do it. Granted, is that how they're going to do it? No, but so be it. So last couple college basketball topics here to touch on. First, the coaching carousel. So we have this nice graphic here from Jeff Goodman here, Field 68. And just kind of talking here, some of the notable hires here. Obviously, the most recent one is Hubert Davis. Was let go by North Carolina after they blow that 19-point lead to VCU, and they hire Mike Malone, who was kind of out of left field a little bit. I'm going to be honest here. I don't really know how I feel about that hire. Well, I guess I'm going to talk it through, and then you guys let me know here down in the comments your thoughts on it. Where really seemed like a lot of people that North Carolina wanted to get just kind of told them no. And for that reason, they had to scramble a little bit here because, I feel like they were really trying to get Tommy Lloyd, maybe even a Dusty May. Like Tommy Lloyd was definitely like, flirting with him, especially after some of his answers last week. But then, when all it really seemed like they weren't going to get a college guy, if they're going to get an NBA guy, it seemed like it was going to be Billy Donovan, especially, you see here the Bulls just let go of all their front office. Like it's kind of weird that they're going to keep Billy Donovan around. Maybe they won't. So it seems kind of weird that he wouldn't maybe jump on this job. So instead they get Mike Malone, who I think is a very good coach. I mean, he's an NBA champion coach. He's won a lot of games. The Nuggets really did him dirty last year. Like, in all honesty, he really should still be coaching the Nuggets. So I don't blame him for wanting to get back in the coaching ranks, but he hasn't coached college since like 2001 when he was assistant on the Manhattan staff. So to go from that being your previous college coaching experience to then now being the head man at North Carolina, I think is a big jump. Like I said, I think he's a very good coach. It's more just me like, how does he recruit? How does he, get guys to play together? So it's going to be interesting to see kind of the makeup of that team where, and again, I don't really know, Billy Donovan's another one. He has been out of the game for a while, but did win 2 national championships at Florida. Like, I think, I wouldn't worry about him as much adjusting from the NBA to the college game as I do Michael Malone. Granted, like I said, I still think he's a really good coach. It's really just going to be how does his GM, how does administration help him out to kind of spend and get a good guy in there, get good players in there. Other notable ones, Will Wade goes back to LSU. The whole scandal a couple years ago was Will Wade, was legally, paying players, getting all that. LSU pretty much had to let him go so that way they wouldn't get a bunch of, fines and, scholarships stripped away and stuff like that. But Will Wade, then after a year at NC State, rejoins the administration that hired him at McNeese State. And it's clear like he loves LSU. And I think, LSU is a job where if he takes him to the second weekend like he has before, like that's great. Whereas, North Carolina State, you got to play the Dukes, you got to play the Carolinas of the world. You're kind of in their shadow all the time. So I think the expectations are definitely, lower at LSU and it's more achievable. Just the way he went about it was pretty slimy, but let's be honest, Will Wade's pretty slimy. So honestly, doesn't surprise me. Like I said, I like that hire for LSU. Like I'm not gonna complain about it, but yeah, just the way he settled, went about it, not the greatest. NC State then replaces him with Justin Gainey, who was on staff at Tennessee. So not a bad hire there. I mean, not a huge flashy name, but also after you just kind of get burned, maybe you don't really want to go with that big flashy name and get burned again. Some other schools in the Northeast that, these are some interesting ones. Jerry McNamara, the former Syracuse legend, he's now going back to his alma mater. He led Siena to the tournament this year, almost took down Duke in the first round. And he's bringing his guy, Gavin Doty, who played a big role on that team with him here to Syracuse, announced here in the transfer portal. So I like that hire, Grant. It'll be interesting to see. They're once again going with one of their own, similar to Red Autry, and obviously that did not work out well. So we'll see how maybe it goes this time around. But, a guy that, has had more winning experience now at another program and I'm coming back. I like that. Brian Hodgson going from USF to Providence. That's a good hire there for Providence. I'm sure they probably wanted a guy like Josh Schertz maybe would have been more their pick. But, Schertz was kind of staying put this cycle. Didn't really like any of the openings, which I don't really blame him. But I like Brian Hodgson, won the American this year with USF. I think, that's a good hire. He is a Northeastern guy. So for him to kind of be back in his original backyard, I like that hire there for Providence. Other notable one, Cincinnati hires Gerard Calhoun, the Utah State coach from this past year, who's a Cincinnati alum. You feel for Utah State. They just kind of have to keep cycling through guys, and they backfill him with Ben Jacobson, who was at Northern Iowa forever, led them to the tournament this year. So that was, a pretty good hire there for them. And then probably the other notable ones, Randy Bennett leaves St. Mary's for Arizona State after they let go of Bobby Hurley. This is one, it's definitely a step up in competition. And I really feel for St. Mary's because this is a kind of tough scene here where they're losing their longtime head coach. Gonzaga, who, was the team that they really competed with in the WCC for a while there, is now leaving. So I feel like St. Mary's is probably going to kind of just fall back into the pack here, be the same tier as like Santa Clara and San Francisco now in the WCC. Like if they're going to try to move up a league to save the Pac-12 or even just the Mountain West, like I feel like that's something they really need to try to get done sooner rather than later before they fall back in, not like a relevancy, but just not as notable, I would say, as they are right now. And then probably the last most notable one, Luke Murray, going from being on staff at UConn now to Boston College. So like I said, sticking there in the Northeast. This is one I like him, going here now to a power conference program. Like he's had mid-majors, calling his phone for a couple of years now. Obviously he's coached in 3 national title games. So for him to go there, I think that's a really good hire there for BC. Granted, like I said, I don't really think he's going to be there super long term, or either he succeeds and then, gets a bump up to an even higher program, or if he doesn't succeed, he just kind of goes back to staff there at UConn. So those are probably the most notable coaching hires. And then the final thing we'll touch here, college basketball-wise, transfer portal is now opened at midnight last night, or last night today, after the national title game. Already some really interesting names in there. Floyd Badunga, the top player in the portal right now, transferring from Kansas. He's going to get a really big bag, and a team that can use a dominant big. Like I say, he's probably going to be going to another blue blood powerhouse program. So he's definitely player number one. Then number 2, number 3 kind of goes back and forth here between Juke Harris, the Wake Forest guard, and then John Blackwell, the Wisconsin guard. So 2 really, talented scoring guards. Granted, I think they're more going to go to a place where they can play more free, kind of continue in that scoring role. So we'll see where they end up going. I'm not like a huge transfer portal prediction guy. If you guys are, feel free to drop your picks down there in the comments. We got Paulius Murskowskis from St. Mary's entering the portal. I would guess for him, he's probably going to follow Randy Bennett to Arizona State unless he can go somewhere else. Stefan Vox, another interesting name. He had some pretty big games at Providence this year. And then, he's going to be in the portal here as well. Jackson Shellstad's another guard that, can really score the ball that I think people are going to be looking out for, trying to get. Samoto Surreal's a really big center that I like, here in the transfer portal from Georgia this past year. Their guards are more the talking point a lot for me for that Georgia team, but he was also a really big, solid center, played a big role on that team. Nico Zagdalis had his flashes, for Vatech. I want to say he went for like 30 points one game early in the season here. So there's already some pretty big names in here. Keep going down the line. Terrence Hill, Sandra Fruz, another big. Asaden Lewis from Villanova. Samit Yigitolu from SMU is another guy I talked about a lot this year that's entering the transfer portal. So definitely a lot of names in here. And like I said, if you're a transfer portal prediction person, definitely drop your picks where you think these guys go. I'm really not. I'm more of I like just kind of see where they go and then make my assumptions and predictions from there. But that's kind of what we got going on here for college basketball. So let's pivot now here more to the NBA. Final week of the regular season. Sunday is going to be the final day of the regular season. So we'll be doing, a lot of NBA playoff preview stuff. Did it last year. We'll not be doing 2 episodes a week like I did last year. Just going to try to do one here. Well, today's Tuesday, but Mondays going forward here pretty much throughout the rest of the NBA playoffs if my schedule allows. Detroit is a team here still in first. They've been in first like forever here. They've already clinched first here in the Eastern Conference. But really for me, the team that I'm watching is Boston. I mean, it's a team that's been to the finals a couple of years ago, won the finals 2 years ago. They have Jason Tatum back, or like I said, Detroit dealing with some injuries with Kate Cunningham. He's kind of questionable here in the lineup. So Boston is probably my team I like at most out of the East. Obviously, we have the Knicks at 3rd, and then Cleveland at 4th. Those teams have all clinched. And then Atlanta, Toronto, Philly, and even Charlotte and Orlando, really. It's going to be a bit of a race to see here who gets like that 5 and 6 seed, who gets stuck in the play-in. The Hornets are a team like you're seeing here have won 4 straight. They're playing 8-2. They're 8-2 in their last 10. They've been playing some really good ball here down the stretch. And that's one, especially like I said, if they get matched up with Detroit, they can maybe pull something off. Maybe I don't think they maybe jump up. Maybe somehow they do all the way to the 5th seed. But Charlotte's a team that like they've been playing good ball. LaMelo Ball's had a really good season for them. Like they're a team I can potentially kind of see sneaky here. Dark horse going to run. Obviously right now my pick would still be probably Boston to come out. Like I said, going to dive more here into the NBA. Haven't been a huge on the NBA this year just because how much I've been talking college ball. But right now, for my casual observer here, before, like I said, really get into it next week, Boston would be my pick, and then my dark horse team probably might honestly be Charlotte. Might be Charlotte. My guy Carter Bond from CarterCast, big Charlotte Hornets fans. Maybe that's a little bit him talking him up. Maybe we'll have to have him come on here, since I know he's an NBA guy, and have him give his predictions here next week. So that's kind of what I'm thinking out east. Out west, it's pretty tight race here. OKC just about got the 1 seed locked up. They'll probably end up locking that up. And then San Antonio, right behind them. So those 2 teams are going to be the top 2 teams. No question about it. But then Denver, LA, Houston, and Minnesota. If you want to consider Minnesota, granted, they've had some injuries with Anthony Edwards as well. Those are the teams, in the mix there for that 3 through 5, where I would say that 3 seed's really what you want to get. Like, that's what, as a Lakers fan here, a Lakers, observer, if the Lakers get the 3 seed, they can maybe make the conference finals. I think if whatever team gets the 4 seed, 4 or 5 out of those 3, they're not beating OKC. I think we're 100% getting OKC in the conference finals, and then either, San Antonio. I think San Antonio probably has the best chance of beating OKC, where like we could maybe get both the 2 seeds there in the finals of Boston and San Antonio, but whoever gets the 3, the 3 seed, whether it's the Lakers, Nuggets, or Rockets, which really more just like the Lakers or Nuggets, I could see potentially beating San Antonio. But if those teams get stuck against OKC here in the second round, I'm not super confident. And then same thing, we got the play-in pretty much locked in here. Houston, Phoenix, LA, Portland, and Golden State. Obviously, Golden State's had their injury issues this year. I don't really see anyone out there going on around, like I said, because they're going to end up playing OKC or San Antonio, who I just think are two really good teams, have been the top of the league pretty much all season here. So if I had to go here, like I said, before the official bracket is out, I'm probably going OKC and Boston as my finals prediction. My dark horse in the West, rather than going San Antonio. San Antonio's probably the team I like the second most. I'll go Denver, just because they have that championship experience. They're currently in the 3 seed right now. If they can stick in that spot, I think they have a good shot to go here on a run. So let's kind of look over here the schedule. Touch on and see if there's any, kind of big games here coming up this week. The rest of the way, obviously, a couple games here tonight. OKC in Los Angeles, the Lakers tipping off here in a bit. It's gonna be a pretty big one, like I said, for that race there for the 3 seed, and then Houston has to head to Phoenix. And we've already had, some finals here tonight. Boston beat Charlotte, Toronto beat Miami, and Minnesota beat the Pacers there for playoff seeding results there. Atlanta and Cleveland, which right now projected to be the 4 and 5, play there tomorrow night, so that could be a pretty big one. And then Portland and San Antonio's second game of that ESPN doubleheader. Like I said, San Antonio, I think, should get that win there. And then OKC playing the Clippers. So tough back-to-back. Maybe, they slip up there. Like I said, I pretty much think it would be like OKC needs to lose out and San Antonio need to win out for San Antonio to get the 1 seed there. On Thursday, good and prime doubleheader, Celtics-Knicks, potentially second round series preview there. I think that would be a really fun series. And then Lakers at Golden State. Like I said, Lakers pretty much kind of need to win out to be feeling good here. Houston in action against Philly as well. Friday, pretty loaded slate because there's no games on Saturday. So I think everyone might just play Friday and Sunday. And that's what I like here that the NBA does, of like having everyone play on the last day of the regular season. I think we're going to have some really fun games there. So let's really look at here this last day. We have, Utah and the Lakers, Golden State and the Clippers, Phoenix, OKC, Denver, San Antonio. So that'll be a really big one potentially. And then Houston taking on Memphis. On the Eastern Conference side, we got Knicks and Hornets should be a good one, as well as Boston taking on Orlando. Detroit heads to Indiana. Granted, Indiana pretty bad. And then Atlanta and Miami. So definitely some games here with a lot of meaning here in this final week of the season. But I think that is going to wrap it up. A little bit shorter episode here today. Like I said, just kind of wanted to step back in. Like I said, my apologies here, guys. It's been pretty crazy, in all honesty, past couple of months. Those of you who know me personally know that. So that's why the podcast, on the college basketball side especially, kind of been lacking here with the consistency. But like I said, hoping here for the NBA playoffs to do every Monday here, just kind of touching on the series results there, as well as, like I said, big college guy this year. So once we get, lottery and more mock draft, kind of who's picking where, we'll definitely be doing some mock drafts, some prospects, talk, stuff like that, stuff I've already touched on here this year. So if you're a fan of basketball, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Here, Variety Sports Network, all my socials and channel, Shoot to Rock, TTV or Shoot to Rock Talking Ball on pretty much every platform. Make sure to check out the 7th inning stretch here on Variety Sports Network, as well as the 5-hole, the NHL show. So like I said, really good time of the year for sports here. NBA and NHL playoffs right around the corner, with MLB here already full go. So a lot of good stuff coming over here on the Variety Sports Network channel. So like I said, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, make sure to like this video, and I will see you guys next Monday. Peace.